To engage in visual thinking, it really boils down to two questions. What are the pieces and how do they fit together? Welcome to Verbal to Visual. My name is Doug Neill. I'm excited to give an example of those two questions at play and how I have been interacting with them today. Before I do that, I wanted to let you know that I've got a handful of workshops coming up that I'm excited about. Throughout the upcoming year, I'm going to be experimenting with some 90-minute workshops and some full-day workshops, each standalone that have a specific focus to them that will give you the opportunity to come hang out with me in this space virtually through Zoom to learn how to sketch out interesting ideas with nothing more than poster paper and a marker, or perhaps tablet and stylus, depending on your preferences. You can learn more about those workshops by following the link in the description down below. Above that, those two questions of what are the pieces and how do they fit together is the kind of overarching question of why. Why are you engaging with this particular material? Why do you want to sketch it out? So do consider that question first and remind yourself why you're engaging with that particular material. But then let's say you're learning something new by listening to a podcast episode, which is what I was doing this morning. While you're listening, ask yourself those two questions. What are the pieces? How do they fit together? This morning I was listening to a new podcast called Cold Pitch by Tara McMullen, who also runs the What Works podcast and Substack publication and book. I really enjoy Tara's work. And the title of the episode that I listened to this morning is called This YouTube Show is a Rich Text. It's about Rhett and Link's YouTube channel. Good mythical morning. I didn't know what to expect going into listening to that episode, but I also want to share that I have been reading this book lately, The Back of the Napkin by Dan Rome. I mention that because one of his frameworks here relates to both of those questions of what are the pieces and how do they fit together. He references the 6 W's, even though they're not quite all W's. There's who/what, there's how much, there's where, there's when, how, and why. Those are the questions that you can ask yourself about any particular situation that you're dealing with, any particular thing that you're sketching out. My first question, what are the pieces, really relates to the first one that I mentioned there of who/what. Who/what is involved in the ideas that you're capturing. Dan suggests you capture the who/what as a portrait, which for me roughly correlates to an icon or a stick figure, simple representation of an object or person. But then all the others relate to the question of how do they fit together? Do they fit together in a chart or a timeline or a map or a scatter plot? Those kind of more diagrammatic representations are what I was thinking about while listening to that podcast episode this morning. And what I would like to sketch out for you now is how they ended up coming together. A bit of a representation of that episode and what to me was interesting about it. Primarily it's a map, but it's also got a chart. First, let's sketch out the map of it, where things live in relation to each other. Since this was a podcast episode about Tara and her husband Sean watching Rhett and Link, their show, Good Mythical Morning, every day after dinner, that's what I chose to capture as the map. So I will sketch out here a screen. Consider this a television or a large computer screen. This is where Rhett and Link will go, and then we've got down here Tara and Sean sitting on the couch watching the show after dinner. So here I will do some very simple, somewhat silly sketches of Rhett and Link, highlighting their difference in hair as the defining characteristic between the two. And what makes this show interesting and some of the things that Tara talked about here, one is the primary dynamic in their show is the friendship between these two. These guys have been friends since childhood. They've been making this show, Good Mythical Morning, for over a decade. They've created over 2,500 episodes. So this link, their friendship, is a primary component of the viewer and creator dynamic. But then another piece that made it interesting, this is where the diagram comes in, is that much of what the show is about, or at least one of the things that the show is about, is personal growth over time. So as viewers, we have got to see and hear about how Rhett and Link and their relationship, their friendship to each other, their relationships with their partners, their lives as members of a family. So there's some sort of a trajectory here that we get to follow along with some overarching themes here of friendship, goofiness, and playfulness, and vulnerability. Part of what Tara mentions about why this is an interesting source of material to engage with is the way in which these two adult men, middle-aged white guys, are modeling what a male friendship can look like, what playfulness in adulthood can look like, what vulnerability can look like, in a way that's pretty rare on the internet and in person. And Tara is talking about this because she is interested in media consumption and media creation. She herself is, of course, a creator, podcast host, author. She's a researcher. So she's very much interested in how we engage with information in different forms, how we process it, what we do with it, in addition to being an entrepreneur, a business person who is creating a business around her creative work. And in the realm of online media consumption, perhaps YouTube in particular, there is this concept of a parasocial relationship. This defines the kind of one-way channel, one-way communication stream between the folks that you watch on YouTube or listen to on your favorite podcasts or follow on Instagram. You develop a relationship with those people because of the window into their lives that you get to see each day, but they don't know who you are. They're not getting any sort of similar updates from you. So it's not a true two-way relationship. It only flows in one direction. But while we can acknowledge that there is this parasocial dynamic here for anyone who watches Good Mythical Morning every day, in this case, there is also an element of interactivity. In most episodes, Rhett and Link are playing some sort of a game or engaging in a challenge that you as the viewer can participate in. So even though they can't see what you're doing or hear you as you shout out the answer, there is the ability for you to engage with their work in that way. They also, I think, have community platforms that you can be a part of and literally chat with other fans of Good Mythical Morning, and I'm sure in some forms with Rhett and Link themselves. So we've got these creators making this show that has these particular things, friendship, and we down here, Tara and Sean in this case, are the consumers engaging with that material, seeing an interesting example of male friendship and various types of growth over time, developing a parasocial relationship with Rhett and Link, but also maybe having some opportunities to interact with that material in some way, shape, or form, and perhaps interacting with each other in a way that's facilitated by what's going on in that particular show. It's this combination of elements that makes this particular YouTube show a rich text, as Tara describes it. One that you engage with and in some ways co-create. I found these dynamics to be interesting because I am this. I'm a consumer of various YouTube channels. At one point in time, I did watch Good Mythical Morning regularly, but then I and Tara, we're also this. We're also creators. Not the same type of creators as Rhett and Link, but still people who are interested in developing a particular craft, making and shipping work regularly to people who hopefully enjoy it, and ideally creating a system of financial support that allows us to continue doing this work. So I could even add myself to this picture right here, to the map component of this, because I am kind of watching Tara watch Rhett and Link. You are now a part of this as well. You're watching me watch Tara watch Rhett and Link, but you don't necessarily have to capture everything on the map. I think we've got the most important elements here, but then we've also got a bit of a diagram going on with this growth versus time and acknowledging the parasocial relationship as well as the potential for interactivity. So this right here is how I would summarize with a visual artifact that particular podcast episode, capturing both the dynamics of the show itself, of that particular episode, as well as kind of where I fit and why I'm interested, both as a consumer of media and as a creator of media. And I wanted to share this with you, not because I think all of you will be as interested in these dynamics as I am, but more as a case study of what it looks like to think through those two questions of what are the pieces and how do they fit together. From the beginning of that episode, I knew some of the players that were involved. So I had Rhett and Link in my mind, I had Tara and Sean in mind. I had established a bit of a setting because I knew that they watched the show after dinner each day. So really the map part of it, Tara and Sean watching Good Mythical Morning, that was fairly easy to establish early on. But from there I was on the lookout of, okay, why is that interesting? What else is going on here? What are the dynamics at play? Which led me to kind of perk up when this discussion of demonstrating particular growth over time, as well as these dynamics of parasocial relationships and interactivity. So I think this is where a lot of the meaning comes into this particular sketch. And this particular visual evolved throughout the day today. The very first version of it, I think as I was listening even, looked like this, where I put the emphasis on that journey, that evolution over time. And in this case, even kind of captured the 4 paths of each individual involved, which to me is one of the most interesting dynamics and what I kind of stuck with in the second version where, okay, let's actually put that on a graph, have a Y and X axis, personal growth over time, still capturing the 4 individually, recognizing that that felt a little too cluttered. And so in the last version of it, kind of brought in a focus just on Rhett and Link as the ones to chart that growth, and then brought in that kind of scene element of Tara and Sean sitting on a couch, watching them after dinner. Now, if I weren't thinking about those 2 questions of what are the pieces, how do they fit together, and experimenting with the frameworks and ideas from Dan Rohn's book, I might not have spent that much time on sketching out this particular episode, which I point out because you don't have to go this deep with every single podcast episode that you listen to, every single article that you read. You can pick and choose, but I will say that it was kind of fun to have those ideas, that episode, kind of somewhat in the back of my mind throughout the day, and every now and again come back and be like, oh, if I were to improve upon that sketch that I started with, what might I try next? Okay, I brought in that XY graph, I kind of like that. Come back a little bit later. What if I capture the scene a little bit? Sitting on the couch, watching them. And then, hey, why not just put the graph on the screen and focus on just Rhett and Link's journey and not so much Tara and Sean's? That's the type of iteration and exploration and experimentation that I encourage you to do on the page, as opposed to feeling this pressure of trying to get it right the very first time you make marks. Treat everything you sketch out as an experiment, as something that you will step back from, look at, have a conversation with, and decide where to go next. That is my encouragement to you today. If you would like to develop your skills a little bit further, no matter where they are right now, do check out those upcoming workshops. I would love to hear about what you are working on and help you get better at sketching out ideas, whether it's for your own personal learning or for sharing interesting ideas with others. You can learn more about those workshops and other resources at verbaltovisual.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.